Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if with the help of Kurama, Naruto leaves the village and build harem with Yugito Samui&karui, Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Super Dark Alley. It was revealed through the alley that Naruto was leaning against a dumpster. He ran for half an hour, before feeling that he was back to the safety of being incognito. He tossed the cloak aside, knowing that it was identified by now. He had no doubt the man survived, since just after he left, Chunin arrived to put him out. It was only thanks to having no chakra that he escaped, that and his fox-like cunning. He knew, from his many chases, that even if he had his chakra unsealed, it would have proved difficult to lock onto his location. Though he saw the good in the encounter, it helped him speed things along, made him realize that longer he spent in the village, the more likely he was to get captured. He found a different cloak that was far darker than the last, on a much cleaner person. He ran for a few more minutes before he exited the alley and looked at his target destination, the Hyuga compound. Just then a loud blaring sound echoed throughout the entire village. He clasped his hands over his ears as a loud voice accompanied the sound. "Attention all villagers." The sandame's voice spoke loud and slightly distorted. "The hell?" Naruto muttered as a projection of the old man's face appeared over the village. "I didn't know he could do that." Naruto spoke with a little caution, hoping that it couldn't see him. A 5 million ryo reward will be administered to whoever could apprehend the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. "He is in the village and he is dangerous." The sandame spoke, as a collective gasp was heard throughout the village. The boy's heritage had been revealed months after his escape. At first the village had been remorseful for treating the child of their late Yondaime the way they did. Though when word spread that he fled from the village, they began thinking of him in the previous amount of hate, if not greater. But that wasn't the only thing that was revealed. His status as the Jinchuriki was made public to the whole village. This just seemed to piss the two off even more. "Oh, that is bullshit. He'll tell the village your biggest secrets, but not you." Kurama yelled, absolutely livid. It only seemed to bleed into Naruto's mind, enhancing his own anger. This is complete bullshit. Naruto thought as clamoring all around him became rather noisy. "I want a net to be dropped over the entire village. No one enters or exits until the brat is found," the Hokage said, revealing the annoyance he had for the blonde container. Naruto scowled at that. It was going to make leaving the village a pain in the. If he stuck to his plan though, he would be leaving the village unscathed and unnoticed. Again he looked on to the Hyuga compound and saw multiple Hyuga hopping from the area, their Byakugans activated, looking for his signature. Again he was glad his chakra was sealed, otherwise he would have been immediately found. He counted the members of the entire Hyuga clan at 75, give or take 5 or 6. The clan was split in two groups, the main house and the branch house, the majority of the members being in the branch house. The members of the branch house were branded with a cursed seal, in order to protect the Byakugan from falling into outside hands. As such, the branch members were tasked as the protectors of the Hyuga clan and also doubled as slaves. Being the slaves of the main house, caused some branch members to develop deep hatred for the main house. Naruto was going to prey on those emotions and turn a few of them. He's been studying the Hyuga clan for the past year. He gained most of the knowledge from Kurama, from when he was locked inside of his mother and Mito. Though the data was a bit outdated, the blonde was glad Kumo had a scroll on the Hyuga affair many years ago. He knew he had to rely on their hatred, so he had to study them even more and learn just who harbored the hated feelings. He would be safe as long as he didn't use chakra. Nobody in the village would expect him to hide out in the most secured place in the village. 2 days later. It was around sunset when Naruto crouched in the darkness of the bushes. In front of him were 3 members of the branch house, all in their late teens. 2 were male and the other, female. He approached them with notions of freedom and being away from the main house. They had been hesitant at first and told him of such feelings. They knew of the price on the blonde's head and knew even if they had captured him, the money would go straight to the main house. Naruto held up his seal tag, that had the Uzumaki clan swirl displayed on it. He told them that he wasn't able to get rid of the sealing of their Byakugan upon their deaths, but he could get rid of the punishing effect of their seals. That had sealed the deal, just as Naruto had predicted. They wanted the work done immediately. The blonde refused and told them that he would when they were ready to leave the village. He refused, just in case a main house member tried to punish them and found their seals didn't work, they would be reapplied or executed. They couldn't help but agree that his words were true. They accepted his terms and promised to hold their resentments of the main house. Alright, I have 3, I need 1 more Hyuga before we can safely escape the village. Any suggestions? The woman immediately perked up. I say you cripple the clan by getting the prodigy, Neji. He really hates the main house for being the cause of his father's death. He feels that his father was born, only to die for the main house. Naruto nodded, loving the news. He still hadn't told the 3 he was going to take them to Kumo. He wanted to reveal that after they left the village. Plus there was something they didn't know about the seal Naruto placed over their caged bird seal. Naruto then thought about the information. Should he reveal that he was taking them to Kumo or would that make them resent him? It was a risk, but was he willing to take it? He came to the conclusion that he needed to know if they were really on board with him, to the end. He'll ask them during the ceremony of applying his seal. Alright, I'll begin studying Neji now. If I feel that he really is the prodigy you make him out to be, then I'll see if I can get him on board, the blonde said, putting the hood back over his head. The other 3 nodded and went back to their duties, awaiting the signal that was going to prelude their escape. But they knew that it was going to be a long wait, considering that the Hokage put up a net over the village. Naruto stayed in the bushes and thought. He had wanted to simply take a main house member, but his plan had obviously changed somehow. He wasn't complaining at all, it was actually working in his favor. More Byakugans for Kumo. The 3 he picked were Chunin and proficient in the gentle fist. If they were praising this Neji person, then he indeed worth his attention. He grunted as jumped onto the roof of the nearest house, before jumping over the compound's walls. He needed to get to the manhole outside of the compound, so he could get to where he slept every night. Just as he exited the grounds he saw a boy standing over his manhole. Luckily his back was turned and the boy couldn't see him. It's too late, Naruto. It was fate that led me to this spot, the boy said while turning around to face the cloaked blonde. Naruto narrowed his eyes and got ready to kill the boy, that is until he saw that it was Neji Hyuga. The same boy, who he was just talking about. He smirked at the fortune smiling on him at that moment. How'd you find me? I'm supposed to be invisible to your eyes. Naruto asked with an kissing tone. He could already tell the boy was arrogant and he knew how to deal with their type. Neji smirked a bit before returning his expression to his usual stoic appearance. My eyes see everything. You could hide your chakra, but not others. I saw the others talking to you behind some bushes moments ago. I wasn't able to see your chakra, but my eyes were able to make out the outline of your body. Neji said, crossing his arms. Naruto nodded his head, impressed with the boy's eyes. It was obvious Neji's eyes were stronger than most. He saw a simple cloth around the boy's head, hiding his cursed seal from sight. It was clear by the absence of a headband that he wasn't a certified shinobi, and yet he was praised as a prodigy. Okay, Neji Hyuga, would you like to put your eyes to the test? It's fate we two would meet each other as we did. Both born into royalty, but denied the privileges of such. We are kindred spirits, you and I. Neji continued to speak, clearly ignoring Naruto's question. Naruto narrowed his eyes, wondering where this was going. He held his hood in place as he kept his eyes on the Hyuga. Oh, kindred spirits are we. He didn't know why, but the boy was creeping him out. Then help me out here, will you? Naruto said with a smile. Yes, kindred spirits. Neji answered with a nod of his head as he began walking slowly towards Naruto. Which makes this painful for me. Neji said as he quickly ran and thrust his palm out at the blonde. Naruto blocked the strike heading for his chest with a quick jab. Neji continued to his assault and Naruto was quickly on the defensive. Just because the Hyuga couldn't block either of his tenketsus, didn't mean that he couldn't harm his internal organs. Though he had nothing to worry about. Plus he had to be careful that the boy didn't accidentally unblock his already blocked chakra. Naruto saw why the boy was considered a prodigy. He was immensely proficient in taijutsu at his young age. Even as a branch member, it was clearly obvious he was more skilled than all of the other branch members and most of the main members. Only Hiashi, the clan head, was more skilled than him. Naruto bumped into a wall and quickly ducked under another open palm strike. He gave the Hyuga 2 quick jabs in the stomach before an uppercut ended the little fight. Naruto saw the unmoving academy student on his back. It's clear you're not used to being hit. Your durability sucks. Naruto said knowing the wind was knocked out of the Hyuga. The blonde crouched next to Neji's torso. I know you recruited the 3 Hyuga from before. You promised them freedom outside of the clan's walls. I want to know where. Neji coughed out. Naruto rose an eyebrow as he again fixed his hood to cover more of his head. That's true. You're a smart kid, I'm sure you can figure out where. Naruto said, poking the boy's covered seal. He knew that if Neji was as smart as he thought, then it would be no reason to hide his destination. Neji blistered at being called a kid by someone younger than him. But he calmed down and looked into the night sky. He racked his mind for any possible answer, until it hit him. Kumo. He muttered, closing his eyes. Bingo. Naruto said, standing to his feet. I agree with you, Neji. It was fate that we met the way we did. It's your fate to leave your clan and it's mine to bring you to Kumo. Surely even you understand this. Naruto said, knowing that all the bullshit about fate would bring the boy to his side. Neji must have regained feeling over his body, because he started moving around slowly. He stood to his feet, a hand on his chin. Oh, sorry about that. I do pack a mean punch. Naruto said, holding up a fist with a chuckle. I have to congratulate you on the hit. You're right, I haven't been hit a lot during any of my training spars, but I have been getting punished by the main house. Usually a Hyuga wouldn't ever leave their clan, no matter the situation. Whatever you promised the other 3 to renounce their clan must have been completely worth it. Neji spoke with a cautious tone. He was almost sure some of their patrollers had sensed his use of chakra, but may have just chalked it up to him training, since Naruto was indeed invisible to their eyes. It wouldn't be the first time this has happened. Naruto chuckled, sensing a bit of curiosity in the boy's voice. You're right, I do have something to offer them. Who knows, it may even extend to you. That is, if you are willing to leave such an illustrious clan. Naruto said, purposely holding back. He wanted Neji to admit, basically beg, to wanting to leave the clan. Fate has led me here for a reason. Obviously you're the reason, you must be offering something worth my time. Neji spoke, glaring at the hooded blonde, knowing what the boy wanted him to do. There he goes with that fate bullshit again. If he mentions fate one more time, I swear I'm going to have to eat him. Kurama spoke with pure anger and annoyance in his voice. Calm down there, Kurama. Nobody's eating anybody tonight, plus you would have to escape from the seal to do that. Naruto thought, making the giant fox grumble in annoyance. Since you believe so heavily in fate, then you know that I indeed have something worth your time. Otherwise, I wouldn't be wasting my time. Naruto said as he began walking backwards, into the darkened alley. Neji knew that his time was running out, seeing as how Naruto was leaving. He had to let go of his arrogance, if only for a second. Okay, I'll leave the clan. Now please tell me what the offer is. Neji said with a bit of anger in his voice. The blonde sensed this and shook his head. I don't know, it didn't seem like you were really going to leave. It just wasn't believable or sincere to me. Naruto spoke as the bottom half of his body began being covered by the shadow of the alley. He's throwing logic out the window. All he needs is time to think, time you aren't giving him. Making him act under pressure, excellent choice. Kurama spoke, watching everything through the blonde's eyes. Neji watched in silence as more and more of the blonde was covered. When it reached the middle of his chest, the Hyuga had to drop to his knees and bow his head in the dirt. Please, I'll leave my clan, I'll follow you wherever you want to take me. I truly mean this, I can't stand being in that clan any longer. Being a slave is the worst feeling in the world. Neji spoke sincerely, his face not moving from the dirt. Naruto knew only his amber eyes were shining brightly in the darkness. You know, Neji, fate doesn't really exist in this world. We shape our own fates. You learned that now, when you had to beg for my help, even though you were born into a family of nobility. I was never going to offer help to anyone who had such a thick stick up there. My original choice was to successfully kidnap the heir, Hinata, since the previous attempt failed miserably. My cage didn't want a bunch of branded members, but lo and behold, here I am gathering a group of them. Luckily I have the key to his and my salvation, a seal that would allow me to remove the punishing effects of your cursed design. This will get rid of the option of simply killing you off, once you're out of the village. Naruto said, feeling kind of cool for his words, while only being a floating pair of eyes. Neji rose his head with a shocked face. He had to admit that he indeed had a large stick up his. In his defense, it was justified. He had bragging rights, as one of the most skillful of the clan. His thoughts then turned to his cousin, Hinata, the girl who started it all. If she hadn't been so weak, his father wouldn't have had to die. Naruto sensed where the boy's thoughts were heading. I for one am glad that attempt failed. Of course, it's a shame your father had to die, but if the kidnapping had been successful you wouldn't have had the drive to push yourself even further beyond your capabilities. And thus I wouldn't have been here to persuade you into joining Kumo. Who knows, in another universe, I might have been trying to ask you to join Suna. Naruto said with a chuckle as Neji finally gasped at the solution to his caged bird problem. Although that wouldn't be so bad, a lot of unrestricted firepower in Wind Country. Can you really get rid of the part of the seal that destroys brain cells upon activation? He asked with completely fascination. The blonde nodded his head, to which Neji flattened his face in the dirt again. If you can really do that, then I'm glad to have been one of your choices. Naruto nodded, his amber eyes dulling down a bit. Good. Now that I have you, I can begin preparations for the escape. In the meantime, don't tell the others where I'm taking them. Now we'll have to wait for the heat to be lowered down a bit. I'll wait until news reaches the old man of the failed attempt to find me. That shouldn't take long. A week and a half later. It was high noon when Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage, received some disturbing news. He sat in his office with an angered expression marring his face. What the hell do you mean you can't find him? I have over 100 members of the Inuzuka clan, 70 of the Aburame clan, and nearly 80 of the Hyuga clan, not to mention the 100 members of Anbu. He's just a little boy, how hard could it really be to find him? He yelled, slamming his fist on his desk. The Anbu member in front of him, most likely a Hyuga, bowed as low as he could. He was more ashamed than fearful of the Hokage's anger being towards him. It seems in the previous years, he's learned how to evade detection from even the most keen of hunters. None of the Inuzukas can get a trace of his scent, and none of the Aburame's bugs can detect any traces of his chakra in the air either. It's like he's literally became a ghost, there's a possibility that he's not even in the village anymore. Unacceptable. Are you seriously telling me that that boy has escaped from the village, not once, but twice? We have the best search and destroy clans in the entire elemental nations. How is it even possible for anyone, other than a certain snake, to escape our grasps? Hiruzen yelled again, putting more pressure into the desk. I want every single tree in this country searched. Every building of every city. And I wanted it done yesterday. Move it. The Sandame yelled even louder, eventually breaking the table underneath him. The Anbu immediately nodded and vanished from his spot to spread the word to spread the search countrywide. Hiruzen sat back into his seat, his annoyance still palpable. He's still in this village, otherwise the forbidden scroll wouldn't have disappeared. Key. Naruto sat in the forest of death with a bored expression on his face. All around him were tigers, happily snoring away. Even if they had been awake, they wouldn't be bothering Naruto any longer, seeing as how he's already killed half a dozen of them. He didn't know why this particular forest was so terrifying to the citizens of the village. It was just like any other section of the forest in this damn country. Sure, the wild animals and insects were far larger than the norm, but if you knew what you were doing, you'll be alright. The blonde yawned, still feeling a bit tired. He was extremely bored. Nighttime was the only form of entertainment he had in the village. Entering the village to check on the people's progress in finding him. They seemed to be losing vigor, so he should be able to leave in a few days or so. Though he nearly blew it when he stealthily raided the village's shops a few times. Luckily for him, they chalked it up to regular crimes that were always being committed in the village. He only really collected food and a few kunai and shuriken, along with a nice-looking sword. It was a katana, with two reinforced, parallel, blades set an inch apart from each other. The guard was dark silver designed in a square shape. The hilt was onyx leather with a silver cap. A 6-inch long, black, tassel was welded into the silver cap and smoothed out to perfection. The weapon was called a Suba, and with a few months of training, Naruto was going to master the deadly weapon. And what am I supposed to do with this? Naruto muttered, indicating the forbidden scroll of sealing he had resting against the trunk of the tree he was in, along with the just-stolen Suba. He stole it from a silver-haired Chunin, knowing full well what it was. Leaving behind the man's charred body, surely told the village that he was still in the village. Though whether they knew that he was in possession of the forbidden scroll or not, was still a mystery to him. He had already copied a few techniques that seemed interesting to him, including a few S-class lightning and fire techniques and a useful wind technique. He was thinking of simply burning the scroll, but there was too many valuable techniques inside. So I guess I'm taking this with me as well, no point in giving it back. Naruto thought with a shrug of his shoulders. Something told him to widen his senses, and he was glad he did, because there was at least 5 Chunin level ninja coming his way. He was glad they were only Chunin level. With his hampered abilities, he didn't know if he would have defeated 5 Jonins. Look over here. A group of tigers, but look in the distance, Those are tiger bones, a chunin said only a few feet above the cloaked blonde. Is it possible that the tigers ate some of their own? A woman said, looking closer into the distance. A strong possibility in this forest, but it's not likely they were the ones to kill them. Do you see that the bones are slightly charred? I have a feeling Uzumaki was in this area. Another woman said with a cautious voice. Or still is. My insects are going crazy and it's not because of this forest. An obvious Aburame spoke with a collective voice, akin to everyone in his clan. Bingo. 1 point for the Aburame. Naruto said excitedly as he punched a large blue flame around the insect user from below. He smirked and hopped down below, right in the middle of the tigers, who woke up and left at the sight of the blonde. Congratulations on finding me, Naruto said with a deep, flourished bow, sweeping his arm in front of him, adding more flair to his introduction. The fight hasn't even started yet, and it's already 1 down, 4 to go. Naruto said with a smirk. Surely you 4 will be enough to take on a rouge shinobi like me. You're no shinobi. You don't have a village to represent. A brown-haired man barked at the blonde. Naruto removed the hood, showcasing said blonde hair, and giving them a nice long look at his amber eyes. Naruto watched their reactions, no matter how small, at his action. He noticed a slight blush appear on the cheeks of a blue-haired female. He shook his head at the words of the chunin. Such naivety from one so much older than I. One doesn't need a village to be a shinobi, only the skills. But I guess I'll simply call myself a hunter, to make you feel better, okay? Naruto asked with an uncanny smile gracing his lips. He smiled wider when the man growled at him. He frowned when he noticed the Aburame was put out right now. He was clearly still alive, although incapacitated. He had lost 90% of his hive to the flames. You little brat! The man yelled as he ran forward. Naruto watched as the man threw his punches. Being trained by the Raikage made every other opponent extremely slower in his eyes. He easily weaved around the wild punches and kicks and grinned the entire time. The man was filled with openings and his anger wasn't the cause. It was painfully obvious he wasn't a good taijutsu fighter. Kenzo-san, calm down, an older chunin said as he too ran forward to help Kenzo. Finally your help has arrived, too bad he's too late. Naruto said, batting aside one of the punches and back flipping, his foot connected with the man's chin. To make matters worse, the man's head was engulfed in flames. Naruto smirked at their surprised faces as the second man finally arrived near him. Naruto dropped into a classic boxing stance and quickly connected 3 jabs into the man's face. The blonde smirked at the man's annoyed rage. You're such an angry person. What do you think the cause of it is? Naruto asked as he felt the use of chakra in the distance. Kaden. Enden. A loud female voice said as a fireball was unleashed in the blonde's direction. The man jumped out of the way and threw a duo of kunai at the 11-year-old. The blonde twisted his body as the kunai harmlessly passed by him before he kicked a charged fireball at the incoming ball of fire. The 2 flames collided before canceling out. When all the flames were gone, Naruto was nowhere to be found. How'd the hell he do that? The female chunin yelled in fright. I don't have an idea. It was a good idea for Ayumi to retreat and inform the Hokage about seeing Uzumaki. We'll just stay here and preoccupy him until Anbu appear, the only surviving male chunin said, joining the female. Too bad Kenzo couldn't survive. Damn demon. The serious female yelled, looking around for the hiding blonde. Where are you hiding, you bastard? He. Naruto shook his head, the scroll and tsuba tied around his waist. The tsuba was inside his cloak, while the scroll was outside. He was just meters behind the retreating chunin. It was the same blue-haired chunin that blushed at his adorable looks earlier. He knew she was on her way to relay his location to the Hokage. He couldn't have that, but that also meant that the old man was unknowingly allowing him a chance of escape. Tonight was the night for him and the others to leave. Perfect. The girl was incredibly fast, it was taking him a lot of energy to catch up to her. Before he could successfully latch onto the girl, he was kicked straight down into the ground. The action kicked up a lot of dirt around the blonde. Don't stop, Ayumi. Keep going. We'll handle Naruto-san from here. Just hurry and tell my father. A male voice spoke as the sound of retreating steps echoed away. Asuma, calm down. He shouldn't be that hard for us to handle, he's only 11. Another male voice said, though it had a lazy undertone. You shouldn't underestimate Naruto-kun, my rival. He's filled with the flames of youth. A hyper voice yelled rather loudly. I agree with Guy-san. Also, he was able to evade us for so long. That alone is a testament of his skill. Asuma's voice spoke with a gentle undertone, even in this situation. Naruto groaned from inside of the dirt cloud. He heard the group of people talking and he paid extra attention to the names used. His eyes widened as he stood to his feet. When the dirt cloud thinned out all the way, he groaned in depression, as his prayers were denied. If it isn't three of Konoha's most notorious elite jonin. Truly a gift and a curse at the same time. Naruto said as Kakashi Hatake, Asuma Sarutobi, and Might Guy became fully visible, all wearing matching jonin vest. I guess an autograph would be out of the question right now. Kakashi stepped forward, one hand in his pocket. Forgive me, sensei, for I'm going to have to harm your son. He spoke just loud enough for them to barely hear as he rose his headband revealing his Sharingan. Whoa whoa whoa. Calm down, Kakashi-san. We don't have to get physical. How about we just talk about this? Naruto held his hands out defenselessly, as he tried to remove violent intentions from Kakashi's mind. Kakashi stopped in his footsteps as he stared into Naruto's soft-looking cerulean eyes. They reminded him so much of his sensei that he decided to listen to the blonde. Fine. Go ahead and talk. Just know my Sharingan can detect lies. The blonde saw the jonin relax, but noticed the others only seemed to remain tense. They were no doubt prepared to act if Naruto did anything suspicious. Thank you. Now I'm sure you realize that, compared to you, I'm nothing but a fly. So I'm not even going to attempt to get on your bad side right now. Naruto said, making himself believe that he was no match for Kakashi. It was completely true as well, considering his current predicament. Plus I still want an autograph from you. Naruto said, further dismissing any hostilities from Kakashi's mind. Though, he didn't know if it was working all the way, because Kakashi's facial features never changed a bit. Meanwhile, the elite jonin was listening and watching the young blonde very carefully. He wasn't arrogant or anything, but he wasn't able to deny the boy's words. He couldn't feel anything coming from the blonde, and his Sharingan could tell that he was telling the truth. Tell me why you've come to the village, and I just might give you that autograph. The blonde relaxed further into his cloak, as his fingers showed his hidden anxiety at the moment. He was working on a solution on how to stealthily unlock his chakra. He knew it was going to be really difficult considering the man had all of his senses pointed at him. I came here to simply retrieve something, he said, telling the full truth. Again the Sharingan showed that the blonde was being nothing but truthful. What is it you wanted to get? Was it the Forbidden Scroll? Kakashi asked the $1 million question. Meanwhile, on the chakra releasing front, the blonde gave up. He was going to have to rely on nature chakra again. The scroll? No, I just happened to stumble upon it, he said, inwardly growling as he cast his eyes down. Without eye contact, the lie detection was going to be based solely on his body language, something that was completely covered. I came here for my inheritance. He quivered out, his voice cracking a bit in his sadness. The silver-haired Jonin narrowed his eyes. Did he remove the eye contact on purpose? Can I really believe that his emotions are real or not? Kakashi thought before sending a sideways glance towards the other Jonin. Asuma didn't seem to be buying it at all. Even Guy was a little cautious of the blonde's words. Though they weren't going to act, because he was the leading Jonin in the group. He looked back at Naruto to see drops of tears falling from his eyes. How could Oji-san do that? How could he tell everyone but me, who my parents were? The blonde continued to mumble, barely coherent to the other's ears. Tell me why you set fire to the outside landscape, and killed those two Jonin. Not to mention, seriously burning a Chunin. Don't tell us you're harmless because a harmless person wouldn't be capable of such a feat. Asuma asked from the sidelines. Naruto's brain was working on another answer and he again decided the truth was better than a lie. I had to. I needed a way to get into the village, but I wasn't expecting it to be so heavily guarded. Why was it so guarded? Naruto asked, still tears flowing down his face. Inside, Kurama was sitting quietly as he watched the blonde's persuasion abilities at work. He wasn't using the underlying genjutsu to help with the persuasion, so he was quite impressed about how things hadn't fallen apart by now. Don't forget about the girl going for help. Kurama yelled when the thought came to his mind. Instantly Naruto's tears halted. He had forgotten about the girl. Single quote exclamation mark single quote. He yelled in his mind. That's classified to your ears. Asuma responded, feeling the shift in the air. It's obvious none of you are going to let me leave, are you? He asked, his head still down. Not after what you've done to the village, Naruto-kun. We were only stalling you into the Hokage and a league of Anbu appear. I'm sorry, but you have to be detained. Guy said with a soft tone. Kakashi narrowed his eyes further, as he too felt the shift in the air. He slowly lifted his hand from his pocket. A sudden move and things were going to get active immediately. You know wind is my dominant affinity. I know I've been neglecting it a lot, but fire is a lot more beautiful in my eyes. Naruto spoke softly. The Jonin stayed quiet knowing things were going to get started soon. From what they knew, the boy could somehow bring fire to life without the use of hand seals or chakra. How was another $1,000,000 question, a question they were ignorant of the answer to. But just because I've neglected my affinity, doesn't mean I don't know how to use it. How else do you expect for me to survive for as long as I have alone? Naruto spoke as he folded his arms, stealthily under his cloak. Wind is everywhere, he said before quickly sweeping his arms outward. The elite Jonin were rooted to their spot, via the use of chakra. But in their surprise, they held up their arms to shield their eyes. The blonde didn't stop there and quickly swirled his arms, while taking a deep breath. When his initial gust of wind died down and they removed their arms, 3 bursts of wind were already upon them. 2 from his hands and 1 from his mouth equals 3 in total, just enough for the Jonins. The force behind the attack propelled the 3 Jonin backwards in their immense surprise. You guys are alright. I won't burn you to a crisp this time. But come our next encounter, I won't be so kind. Naruto said as he disappeared into the forest. Kakashi and the others immediately righted themselves in the air, hearing his voice drifting in the wind. Damn his chakraless body! Kakashi yelled, punching a tree before shielding his Sharingan. Even with his Sharingan he wasn't able to detect a single sliver of chakra being used. How the hell did he use the wind like that? He asked, completely livid. The Jonin then took off in the direction they hoped Naruto went. I told you not to underestimate Naruto-kun, Kakashi. He's deeply in tune with the art of deception, the art of telling half-truths and bold-faced lies. Guy said with a bit of praise. This is no time to be praising him, Guy. We just let him get away. I knew we should have just attacked him when we saw him. Why didn't we let him do that? Asuma yelled frustrated. After 2 minutes of fruitless efforts, the trio stopped their search. How could a child vanish into thin air like that? Kakashi asked, his air of aloofness returning. Just at that moment, the Hokage appeared along with a dozen Anbu agents, as well as the female Chunin. Where's Naruto at? Were the first words to come out of his mouth, while the Chunin went off in search of her teammates. The 3 Jonin lowered their heads in shame. He gave us the slip. Asuma said, shaming his father's name. Hiruzen's eye began to twitch in an uncontrollable manner, before he somehow kept from exploding. Kakashi, did you get his scent at least? The Sandaime asked, completely blending in with the forest around him. Not even a dozen of the Inuzuka clan's prized dogs could get a lock on the blonde. Kakashi informed. Hiruzen nodded his head. It was the same 4 years ago, when he first left. After the rain washed the scent of blood away, he just seemed to vanish. He knew though, from the various reports that dead members of the long-lost Root organization were being found. He knew they were Root because of the seal marked on their tongues. Danzo had obviously ignored his command the organization, but he couldn't help but wonder how they kept finding the blonde. Maybe they were getting lucky, but had to resort to banding with his rival. Even together, Naruto remained out of their grasp. Hiruzen shook his head a bit and turned towards Guy. Guy, do you think you can search the entirety of the Forest of Death by the end of the day? He could still be inside, and if you see Anko, have her search with you. This is her own slice of heaven. I'm pretty sure Naruto has encountered her. How else could he roam around freely? Guy nodded. I'm on it, Hokage-sama. If I don't find Naruto-kun by the end of the day, I'll do 1,000 laps around the village on my hands. Guy yelled before he vanished. Hiruzen turned his gaze to his son and his facial features showed just a bit of anger. I'm disappointed in you, son. How did he escape 3 of my elite Jonin? The boy's got a bit of a silver tongue. Asuma told his father. This made Hiruzen rise his brow a bit. Do you think he joined up with Orochimaru? Asuma shook his head. That was my first thought after hearing him talk. But the way he escaped was too unlike the defective Sannin. This time, instead of using fire, he used wind. Asuma informed his father of everything that happened. The Sandaime kept his features steeled as he listened to the story. Halfway through he turned his gaze to Kakashi, whose eyes were cast down but no doubt felt the Hokage's gaze upon him. He looks that much like Minato-kun? He asked the silver-haired Jonin. The man simply nodded his head slowly. What about the rest of his appearance? Did he look like he was eating? Did he look healthy? Hiruzen asked, a little worry slipping into his tone. Kakashi rose his head and looked into the Sandaime's eyes. With the way he endured my initial attack, I have to say he's definitively healthy. It looks like someone found a master, because his evasion was extremely clever and quickly executed. Kakashi spoke with a truthful tone. Yes, no way he could have taught himself how to fight. Hiruzen said before turning to the Anbu behind him. I want you to search the forest along with Guy. Keep out of sight and keep your chakra levels undetectable. Naruto-kun had a bit of sensory training as well. He told the Anbu before they all vanished from sight. Naruto asked why you would reveal his secrets to the village, when you didn't even reveal them to him. Those weren't his own words, but it might as well have been. Kakashi asked with an inquisitive gaze. That has always been a question that has plagued his mind. It seemed underhanded and completely disrespectful to Naruto's feelings. This time it was Hiruzen who lowered his eyes. It wasn't on purpose. The council kept demanding the running Jinchuriki's head. They kept saying that, now that he was fleeing from the protection of the village, he was now a criminal on the run. I'm sure you know how stubborn civilians are, they just don't understand the working of the shinobi world. Hiruzen began, speaking softly for Kakashi and his son. They just continued to hound me, until I exploded. Having Naruto run away from me was truly devastating for me. I wasn't thinking and I revealed who his parents were. It was too late to take my words back after they were said. I wish I hadn't said them because that only seemed to enrage them more. They were beyond angry that the son of their hero would run from them the way Naruto did. They demanded his return and his lifelong imprisonment. At the time, that punishment sounded better than death, so I agreed. I made it known to the whole village about who the blonde truly was. Somehow, without him there, it seemed easier to tell the village. I'll understand if he thinks I'm a bad guy, but I truly want him back. I only want him to forgive me, for not being there to properly take care of him. Hiruzen spoke, his tone full of sadness and guilt, dominant in his mind. Silently Kakashi turned his back and ran deeper into the forest. Hiruzen hung his head, a single tear rolling down his cheek. Losing his grandchild was nearly equivalent to losing his firstborn and wife during the Third Shinobi World War and Kyuubi attack, respectively. Sarutobi looked up when he felt a hand on his shoulder. His son was smiling softly at his father. I'm sure he'll understand your reasons when we find him, father. Look on the bright side. Asuma said before Hiruzen rose his brow in confusion. He still thinks of you as his Oji-san. That instantly brought a smile to the old man's face as he got back into Hokage mode. You're right, thank you son. While the others check inside of the forest, I want you to search all around it. Pick up any stray shinobi and kunoichi to have them aid you, he told Asuma. The younger Sarutobi nodded with a smile on his face before leaping away to do his job. Hiruzen was left alone in the forest. We'll find you soon, Naruto-kun. Real soon. The old man muttered before he used a simple body flicker to disappear. He. Naruto continued to run until he came to a large waterfall, smack dab, in the middle of the forest. It wasn't a big sight, but it was just big enough. He rose his head at the odd sight, before an idea came to mind. He inhaled as much as he could, until his lungs were ready to burst. Before he let out a steady stream of wind. His strong stream of wind parted the waters, showing a hidden cave behind. I knew it, he thought triumphantly as he took a few more gulps of air. He took a few steps backwards, gearing for a running start, before he began running. He released the stream of air again, as his speed allowed him to jump clear over the 100-foot wide gap between him and the falls. Without his chakra, running atop the highly disturbed waters would be next to impossible. Back to him, he effortlessly flew through the body-wide gap his wind left in the falls. He rolled along the rocky ground and immediately noticed its dampness. He rose to his feet and hugged his body. The temperature seemed to have dropped about 20 degrees. Living in Kaminari no Kuni had gotten his body used to much colder environments, but just the suddenness of the drop had caught him by surprise. He rubbed his hands as he released a puff of fire into his hands. It was essential to rely on his body heat when the sun wasn't an option. It was easier when you have a giant fire demon sealed in your gut. There, I should be safe here, until the heat dies down. Meanwhile, let's check where this cave goes. Naruto said before snapping his finger and a bright blue flame flared to light above his thumb. He smiled at his flame before walking deeper into the cave. Kumogakure. Yugito sat with her friends, her face showing nothing but worry. You guys aren't worried. Naruto-kun's been gone for 2 weeks, who knows what happened to him, she said before standing a pacing back and forth. Shut up, Yugito. Geez, you're starting to annoy me. Karui said with a large tick mark on her forehead. Blondie's a fully capable ninja. You have nothing to worry about. He's probably already finished with what he had to do, and is on his way as we speak," she added, crossing her arms. Karui was what many would call a tomboy, a beautiful tomboy, I should add. She was a dark-skinned kunoichi with long red hair spiking down her back. A white, bandana-fashioned, forehead protector covered most of her hair on the top of her head. She had amber eyes, just like Naruto's, something she secretly adored. On each of her ears were a simple yellow earring. Her attire was a simple gray dress, with the sleeves ripped off, that ended just past her waist. A darker gray skirt made up her bottoms, going well past her knees and stopping mid-shin. She wore fishnet stockings and thigh-high boots with white soles. On her back was a rather long katana. She was getting better with every time she trained with it. Or he could have acted recklessly and started attacking everyone and is now surrounded by a whole lot of people that don't like him anymore. I thought girls with flat chests were supposed to be smarter. Omoi said as his mind continued to think up scenarios Naruto could be in. Omoi was the only male in their genin team, of course not counting Killer Bee. Like his teammate, Karui, he was dark-skinned and always seemed to be overthinking things. He had white, spiky, hair much like Naruto's. On his forehead was a black-clothed, forehead protector, that perfectly contrasted his hair. Like his forehead protector, his eyes were also black, and had a slight sheen to them. His attire was composed of an overlong, gray, shirt that was designed with a hood. A darker gray set of pants were wrapped by red and white shin guards. He also wore red and white, bandage-styled, hand guards. Again, like his teammate, he too had a long katana on his back. Those two swords must have been part of a set or something, because they both looked alike. White cloth around the very long handle and white diamonds running along its length. A white square guard and a long burgundy scabbard. Who knows, he could have fallen asleep and got eaten by a bear 2 weeks ago. There's too many posse, he continued before he was interrupted by Karui's punch to his head. I don't have a flat chest. I'm just compact. Karui finally exploded before she began stomping on his body. Be careful, Karui, you might cause an earthquake and destroy Kumo. Omoi pleaded as he was getting his beating. Their final teammate, Samui, shook her head. You two are such children, so not cool, she said softly while looking sternly at her teammates. Samui was the impromptu leader of Team Samui, being second to only Killer Bee. Unlike her teammates, she was a fair-skinned teenager. Even at her young age, she was already developing a large chest. Her yellow hair was straight and fashioned into an asymmetrical bob style, and her bangs framed her face perfectly, being long enough to reach her shoulders. Her blue eyes were just as serious as her facial features were, very. By that, you could tell that she was always ready for her assignments. Her attire was a similar gray and very loose blouse, that revealed a lot of her cleavage. Under her blouse, she wore mesh armor, that also peeked into her cleavage. She wore a rather short skirt, only going to the middle of her thighs before stopping. She also wore red hand guards, black high boots, and a thick belt wrapped tightly around her waist. Again, unlike her teammates, she carried a tanto strapped horizontally on her lower back. Because of her calm and aloof nature, she was more adept at reading people, her readings nearly being spot on every time. Omoi would overthink the situation, as he always did, and Karui would rather fight now and ask questions later. You guys are no help at all. Yugito yelled annoyed at them before she begun stomping off in anger. Karui stopped beating Omoi up and looked at the retreating Yugito. What's eating her panties? She asked with a raised eyebrow. Samui shook head and followed the other blonde. She stopped the Nibi container with a hand on her shoulder. What Karui said was right, Yugito-san. You should simply wait patiently, he's fully capable of taking care of himself. Otherwise Raikage-sama wouldn't find him worthy of being his apprentice. You have to remember you aren't the only one worried about him right now. We're just getting through our worries in different ways. Samui said as the two blondes shared a soft smile. Yugito were surprised by the blonde's words, and had to admit they were true. She just needed to wait patiently and wait for Naruto. She was clearly stronger than even she thought. Their last mission taught her that. Again, I wonder who's the oldest, she thought with a mental blush at Matabi's laughter. You're right, Samui-chan. Thank you. Your words are always better than those teammates of yours, and Matabi only loves to tease me nowadays. Yugito said, her smile growing with each of her words. The younger blonde nodded. You should train to pass the time. Next thing you know, Naruto will be back and you'll be on your next mission. Samui responded before turning, while rubbing her shoulders. And when Naruto comes back, he'll rub those shoulders of yours. He knows how they ache each day. Yugito commented mindlessly as she followed the other blonde's words and left to go train somewhere else. Not the day after. Samui murmured softly with a light blush as flashes of previous massages came to her mind. She loved how relaxed and light she felt after every session. Naruto-kun's got magic oil, and magic hands. She thought, her blush gaining a lot more color. Hey Samui, why is your face so red? Did you get stung by a bee? This must have been a rare bee, because your face hadn't started its swelling yet. Or maybe you caught a cold in the past few minutes. That would mean your immune system is terrible. You could easily sneeze and quickly create a worldwide epidemic. Who knows? Next thing you know, we're all zombies walking around, trying to eat each other's brains. Omoi continued to talk as the others quickly tuned him out, to the best of their abilities. Okami, his talking is worse than B-sensei's horrible rapping. Karui groaned, her hands over her ears. Yo Fu, what's up with the diss? You know I bring the sickness. A voice came out of nowhere. About time you got here, sensei. Karui yelling with a smile on her face, before pointing at Omoi. Please stop him from talking, she said, knowing that her form of violence never seemed to shut Omoi up properly. She needed Killer Bee's form of violence to shut him up. The Hachibi container shook his head and crossed his arms. I'll make you suffer for a while. Until you tell me my rhymes are full of style, he said before he inaudibly gasped and took out his notebook. He began silently writing in his book, while the others silently watched him. The only sound being Omoi's mutters about the redness on Samui's cheeks. I'm feeling hella fine, I just wrote the baddest rhyme, thank you. Now Omoi, quit your thinking, and get to packing. We got another mission, so start your ignitions. We set off in 1 hour, so hurry up and ready your power. Why are you still here? Hurry up or it's D ranks for the rest of the year. Killer Bee rapped as his students finally left his sight. He smiled wide as he continued to write in his notebook. Unknown cave. With Naruto. Naruto continued to walk through the cave. He's been inside for a good hour and felt that he's already walked a few miles. It was around 5 or maybe 6, at the very least. Wow, this is a long cave. Naruto commented as he continued walking. He remembered dropping down a shaft at least twice while in the cave, while he turned left and right at least a few dozen times each, sometimes running into a dead end. Other than the turns, it seemed like a pretty straightforward cavern. Finally, after a few more minutes of walking, he came to a wall. He quickly realized that he was on the bottom of a shaft, and needed to jump up to the top. You must be near the end of this cave, Kurama said, sparking some excitement into Naruto's feet. Naruto grinned and tensely bent at the knees, before jumping high. He jumped a little too high and had to quickly twist his body a bit and avoid stabbing himself into a sharp stalactite. He planted his feet on the hanging pillar and pushed himself towards his destination. He landed with a skid and smirked. Man, I love being a ninja, he said as he stood to his feet. The prospect of reaching the end spurred him on and he began running. He noticed the brightly light and the sound of rushing water. His blue fire vanished from use and he ran out of the cave. He immediately noticed where he was at. He was directly north, outside of the village. My new hideout has just became my new way out. Naruto smirked as he looked back at the mouth of the cave. How very convenient, Kurama muttered with a smirk that was just felt by the blonde. Not to mention the moon is getting darker by the night. I might be out of here sooner than I realized, Naruto said as his brain already began working on how he was going to escape. A diversion wasn't going to work again, unless he was the actual diversion. I got it, he thought, hoping the others will be safe until he met up with them. From what he could tell, the cave traveled deep under Konoha, before returning to the surface outside of the village. He remembered the entire cavern rather intimately at the moment. If the others needed a map drawn out, then he would be glad to. Though he didn't think they would need one, with their Byakugan, they could see their way through. I might even leave tonight, Naruto thought before running back into the cave. That night, Naruto watched as the four Hyuga ran through the cave. He stood in the forest of death and his mission was finally coming to an end. For some reason, maybe in good faith, he told them where he was taking them. Somehow, they didn't seem surprised. He even went to the assumption that Neji had told them, but he was just as surprised as he was. He hadn't told them, but they had figured out on their own. He gave them the option of them actually following him or going back to the compound and they decline. In truth, they didn't even know that Neji was a part of their little group, until a few days ago. He even went and applied his seal on their foreheads. Now, they were free of the Hyuga's power grip on their lives and more persuaded to his words, but only a little. His seal only made them a little more loyal to him. Naruto shook his head as he finally set off towards his final destination. He had given one of the Hyuga the forbidden scroll and he told him to guard it with his life. Now that he knew the scroll was forever out of Konoha's grasp, he could rest easily and complete his objective. He wanted to rest easily, but the whole forest seemed abuzz with activity. Still, Naruto asked incredulously as he watched a Jonin fly high above his location. He was rather surprised he wasn't seen, but why look a gift horse in the mouth? He continued running, until he couldn't feel any signature around him, save for one. A large snake appeared and quickly coiled around him. Before he could gasp for air, he blew out a small ball of air. He watched in satisfaction as it went through the roof of the snake's maw and blew out his brains. It looks like I nearly caught me a fox. And a cute one at that, a voice said walking from behind a tree. So you did see me, Naruto said, quickly putting his hood back on and hiding his face from the purple-haired woman. The woman's outfit was rather promiscuous looking. She wore a mesh bodysuit that went from her neck and ended in the middle of her thighs. An orange skirt and a blue belt was also seen. But most of her outfit consisted of her large, beige coat with a dark purple inseam. She was wearing high-heeled sandals and wore a snake's fang, wrapped in a thick cord, around her neck. At least her mesh was packed together to prevent people from looking directly at her nipples, but the outline of them were still visible. Of course I seen you. Are you enjoying the view? She said, pushing her mounds together a bit with her arms. Hell yeah, Kurama yelled in Naruto's mind as the blonde blushed at the blatant show of. His own response was cut off because he sensed another snake attempting to silently bite into his Achilles tendon. He quickly rose his foot and stepped on its lunging head. Sorry about that. These snakes have a mind of their own, she said as two more snakes attacked the blonde. Naruto acted fast and the Tsuba appeared in his hand and he removed the heads from the attacking reptiles. His strikes were wild and barely coordinated, but they got the job done. He sheathed the weapon and promised himself he wouldn't be using it anymore until he learned how to use it better. So why are you still in Konoha? Naruto asked out of the blue as he turned his attention back to the snake user. Anko had a brown boa constrictor around her body as she silently watched it slither around her body. Just because most of the villager are assholes, doesn't mean all of them are. Don't get me wrong, I was in your situation as well, kid, but I was one of the lucky ones, she said as the boa slithered down into the branch she was in. Naruto watched it silently as he began thinking how long he had to deal with this woman. So how did you escape their torment, since you're obviously still in the village? Naruto asked, wondering how differently he could have handled his situation. Anko softly smiled, a genuine smile from the looks of it. She wasn't surprised the boy knew about her past, the whole village knew, just as the whole village knew his past. I found friends, she said simply. These friends fought for me and protected me from the abuse the village continued to put me through. Even to this day I'm getting abused, but it's more in the field of glares and rumors. When I saw the rumors were only making me more cautious to be around, I owned it. I gave them what they wanted and now they steer clear and relatively leave me alone, she said, not knowing how Naruto was going to take her words, for they were what she really felt. Own it, Naruto said softly as he silently looked at his hand. It's so simple and yet brilliant at the same time, he continued, making Anko smile. All I had to do was own it. Okay. They wanted a demon, I'll give them one, Naruto said, clenching his fist tightly. Anko quickly felt the shift in the air. Wait, that's not what I meant. I was just using me as an example. She quickly spoke as Naruto's chakra quickly unsealed and spread around the area. No, you're right, Anko. I have to embrace what I am. Thank you for this talk, I'll always remember it, the blonde said as his pupils began stretching upwards. Oh, she said before an explosion of chakra shook the forest, forcing her arms up to shield her eyes from the shockwave. Just as quick as it appeared, it vanished just as fast. The violet-haired special Jonin removed her arms from in front of her face and looked around. She blinked a few times in her shock. Whoops, she said before whistling innocently as she quickly left the area. Konohagakure. The sudden sensation of the Nine Tails chakra flooded the village with flashbacks of the past. None more than the Sandaime, Hiruzen Sarutobi. The aged man widened his eyes at the familiar chakra. From what he knew, Naruto was ghosting through his village, so why the sudden flux of chakra? From what he could sense, it was filled with malice and a surprising feeling of acceptance. Anbu, let's get to work. Naruto showed himself. The Sandaime said as he shed his Hokage robe and revealed his old battle armor. Ki. Naruto ran through the village. He calmed his chakra and only began concealing his chakra now. After weeks of not feeling his chakra, it was wonderful to have it back at his disposal. I missed you, chakra, Naruto thought inwardly, hugging his chakra. Multiple shinobi appeared in front of him, attempting to stop him. He easily swatted them aside and continued moving, his destination, the Hokage Tower. Oji-san, where are you? He yelled in a sing-song. A random group of Jonin appeared in front of him and began to attack. They all did their hand seals and released searing hot, red and orange flames. Naruto smirked and swung his leg in a wide arc as blue flames met the opposing flames in the middle, easily canceling them out. If the sun was out, that would have went through that and burned them easily. Naruto thought as he continued his momentum and swung his other leg, this time sending a large gust of wind their way. Just like with the elite Jonin, these stuck themselves to the roof of the buildings to prevent their movement. You'll have to do better than that. You're lucky I only want your Hokage. Naruto said quickly, dashing between them. Within minutes, half of the village was on his heel. He had been redirected from the Hokage Tower many times, before he ended up running through the many training grounds. This is where most of their destructive techniques came out, as did his. Kaden. Adana Taiyo no Tori. Great sun bird, Naruto muttered as he released a large flaming bird that flew high into the air. Chose now, do you want to be burned, or do you want your village to be burned? Either way my pet will be fed. Naruto said before a large water dragon quickly crashed into flaming bird. A large steam filled the area as a familiar voice sounded throughout the area. I allowed your escape earlier. Now I won't be so nice. Kakashi said as he quickly cleared the fog with his chakra. When things became clear, Naruto was left in the middle of a field with nothing but Konoha shinobi around him. Only a smirk was on his face as he stared at Kakashi. You sound angry. Are you angry? Naruto asked as Kakashi uncovered his Sharingan eye. Oh, I know why you're angry, it's because I gave you the slip, isn't it? Naruto questioned with a smirk. No more talking, let's have the fight that was meant to be. Kakashi said before directing his attention to the surrounding shinobi and kunoichi. All of you, stay the out of this, he said before taking out a kunai and running straight at the young blonde. I wonder if you realize how weak you are compared to the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Do you think about that, Kakashi? Naruto asked as he easily evaded the kunai. Do you not realize who I've been training with the past 4 years? A lot can happen in a few years, with the right sensei, of course. Naruto said before thrusting his palm outward. Instead of seeing Kakashi's body flying backwards, he saw a log exploding in a shower of splinters. And you're still years away from having my kind of experience. Kakashi responded as he appeared behind Naruto, his kunai poised as his neck. And you don't remember who you're dealing with. Naruto said before Kakashi tired to slice through his throat, but found his arm restrained. The scarecrow was surprised to find a chakra tail tightly grasping his wrist. He felt another wrap around his waist before he was flung across the clearing. The blonde grinned at the flying Jonin before his enhanced ears picked up another familiar sound. Restrain the Jinchuriki. Nearly immediately he saw wood appear all around him. He smirked and went for one of the many large gaps in the wood and looked over and saw the Hokage along with a few dozen Anbu around him. One of them had his hands on the floor, commanding the wood that was still after him. All you're doing is making more kindling for me to burn. Naruto said before a blue crescent blade of fire seared through a thick strip of wood that was in his way. Naruto wasn't stupid, he knew that if this kept up, he was going to end up caught. He jumped backwards and did a few flips over and around some troublesome pieces of wood. Meanwhile, as Naruto continued to dodge, Kakashi quickly moved over to the Hokage. I was fighting him, Hokage-sama. Within minutes and I would have had him restrained. Kakashi said, annoyance clear in his voice. You'd best watch your tone, Kakashi. Otherwise I'll have you imprisoned for insubordination. Now just stand here and watch as I put an end to this chase. Hiruzen said sternly, not even looking once in Kakashi's direction. Tenzo, put an end to this. Yes, Hokage-sama. The Anbu said as dozens more pieces of wood appeared around Naruto. Naruto breathed out a large stream of blue fire and quickly burned through the approaching lumber. He knew from earlier in the chase that they seemed to move faster when he was using Kurama's chakra. Kurama told him about Hashirama and how he was able to subdue Tailed Beast. It seems this man somehow received Hashirama's DNA, because no one else was capable of his abilities. Kurama said, added to the blonde. Naruto nodded and continued his evasion. He had a feeling the Hyuga had already sped through the cave and were on the other side by now. Okay, I guess it's time to make my escape. Naruto thought before the assault seemed to halt, for some unknown reason. Naruto chose that moment to relax and cautiously look at the wood using Anbu. What's wrong, Anbu-san? Why'd you stop? Naruto asked before he felt a hand on his shoulder. Fortunately, he was able to quickly substitute himself with one of the many charred pieces of lumber. Stay back. Don't touch me. Naruto yelled at the old man, who wore a downcast expression. Don't you ever touch me. Oh Naruto-kun. You look so different now. You look so much older now. I see you've gotten a bit taller since I last saw you. Hiruzen spoke softly with a sad smile. Now far away from the Hokage's reach, Naruto smirked at his words. Yes, Oji-san, people do that after 4 years. They grow older. I see you did the same, though you still look the same from 4 years ago. Naruto said, wondering why the ground seemed to be getting damper under his feet. Even through his shoes, he could feel the wetness seeping into his soles. The Hokage shook his head. I don't feel the same, he said before looking sadly at Naruto again, with a soft smile on his lips. I missed you, Naruto-kun. Why didn't you come to me for help? You know I would have tried to help you. Yes, try, being the key word. Just face it, Oji-san, you hated me just as much as the rest of the village. You hated that the Kyuubi killed your clan and murdered your wife. Naruto said, cutting deep into the man's heart with his words. Admit it. Admit that you hate me. Naruto yelled angrily as he almost forgot about the increasing water underneath his feet. Honestly, the Hokage was stung deeper than anyone could understand. But he couldn't agree with the blonde's words. He didn't hate the boy, he never could and never would. Being annoyed though, that was a different story. Though before he could actually speak, the water under the blonde's feet quickly burst into action and surrounded him. At the exact moment the water fully enclosed around him, was the moment that the same Anbu appeared and put his hand in sphere of water. With the water prison completed and Naruto immobilized, wood returned to the picture and securely wrapped around the blonde. Jinchuriki securely restrained. The Anbu spoke before looking at the Hokage. The Sandaime looked at the contained blonde with worry as the water remained immovable. Through the whole containment, the blonde remained fixed in his spot. He didn't even try to escape. What do you have cooking in that noggin, Naruto-kun? Hiruzen asked as the blonde smirked. Don't you find it suspicious about the amount of chakra you sense from me? Naruto said inside of the water prison. He was thankful this Anbu was allowing him his speech, otherwise this wouldn't be as fun. What do you mean? Your chakra levels are enormous. Completely overshadowing the reserves of many of my strongest shinobi. Hiruzen spoke. The blonde smirked at the praise. Exactly. Don't you find it weird that I would suddenly be sensible to the entire village? Hiruzen stayed quiet as he sent his senses straight into the blonde's core. It was true, he had a lot of chakra inside of him. But something was weird, it should be more. A lot more. Until it clicked. You're a clone, aren't you? Ding 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 dg gurg. The newly revealed clone continued to sound until water filled his mouth, but he didn't seem to be choking. Tenzo, give him his speech back. I want to ask this clone something. Hiruzen ordered after a few minutes. Where's the original going? What was his true purpose in this village? Hiruzen questioned sternly as the clone started to laugh. You have to tell me how it feels to have the same person escape your village twice. The clone yelled while still laughing. Just tell me what I want to know. The Sandaime yelled, clearly annoyed. I don't know what's funnier, the fact that you think I'll tell your wrinkly old anything. Or that you think the boss would allow me to live if I did. The blonde clone said as his body began to glow white. And now I'm going to explode anyway. The clone said as he began laughing louder. Retreat. Hiruzen yelled loudly as everyone turned around and began to quickly run backwards. Tenzo ripped his hand from the water prison and followed suit, leaving the clone wrapped in the wood. Since I'm going to die, I might as well tell you anyway, the clone said, stopping Hiruzen in his tracks, a large distance between them. He wanted to cover his blind spots. The clone barely got off before a large explosion shook the area. With original blonde, immediately after explosion, Naruto grinned as he continued to run outside of the village. The Hyugas all around him, their Byakugans active and their field of vision being a good 800 to 1100 meters in all directions. He looked at his left. The female Chunin was there, a smile on her face, as she kept her eyes forward. Even from this distance, I could see the explosion your clone left, she spoke before looking at Naruto in admiration. Her name was Hotaru and she had long dark brown hair, with a light violet tint. Under her light gray cloak, she wore a white, long-sleeved, blouse. She wore a light gray pair of pants with white tape around her ankles and blue ninja sandals. On hers and the other's forehead, was the Uzumaki's swirl design, replacing the previous, X, that resided there before. The lines on both sides of the original seal remained, they being the part of the seal he couldn't get rid of. Also, as the old seal used to glow a bright shade of green, this new seal didn't glow at all. Even from this distance, I could still feel the explosion your clone left. Neji said, situated on the blonde's right. Like Hotaru, Neji was wearing the same colored cloak. Underneath said cloak, he wore a beige shirt, dark blue shorts, and blue ninja sandals. He also had white tape around his right arm and leg. And behind him were the twin brothers, Taiki and Daiki. The only difference between them being their birthmarks. On Taiki's face, right on the bridge of his nose, was a small bruise. On Daiki's face, the bruise wasn't there. Like Hotaru and Neji, they had light gray cloaks covering their attire. They each wore the exact same thing Hotaru was wearing, except they weren't wearing a blouse. When he picked them those weeks ago, he and Daiki had to really work to get Taiki. Or was it the other way around? Naruto didn't even know anymore. How come you didn't tell us you were hiding in the scroll? One of the twins asked from behind. Naruto turned his head to look at one of the twins, not knowing who spoke. I wanted to see the surprise on your faces. You should have seen them, it was priceless. Naruto said before laughing loudly as he remembered the event. Flashback. 5 minutes before explosion. The group of runaway Hyuga had emerged from the cave with grins. It only took them a quarter of an hour to traverse through the cave. Thanks to their Byakugan, they made quick work of it. That was easier than I thought it would be. One of the twins commented with a crack of his back. I have no idea why it took Naruto so long to go through that. It was so easy. The other twin added. The only female shook her head and leaned her hands against the scroll tied around her waist. To be fair, it was his first time. Not to mention he walked the entire way and didn't have a Byakugan. She said, also being the oldest, at 19. The twins being 17 and Neji being 12. By the way, didn't he tell us he would meet us when we came from the cave? I can't see into the village with my Byakugan, but I can still feel him clearly. Neji said as he crossed his arms. It was at that moment that a large vibration was felt by Hotaru. Sweet Kami, what is that? She mumbled before a small puff of smoke appeared. The blonde stood there with a grin at their surprised faces. Wow, you guys are out already. The surprise would have been better if you were still in the cave. Naruto said, chuckling as they tried to sputter a response. All right, enough of that, let's go. We don't have long before the fireworks. Naruto said before jumping over the rushing river and speeding straight for the border to the country of hot springs. The others shook their head and began following their new, and very young, leader. As soon as they got in their formation, the ground under them began shaking for a long minute. Flashback end. Alright guys, and girl, keep your eyes open. We want to steer insanely clear of any and all other shinobi. We're on our way to Kumo, your new home. Naruto said with a smile as he sped up. The others nodded and sped up their pace as well. The blonde looked back at the, slightly, older Neji. Here's a soldier pill. If you feel the need to, take it. Naruto said, tossing the teen a small brown pill. Alright people, let's take to the trees. Naruto said as he jumped high into the air and landed on a tree branch. He didn't look back, knowing the others were behind him. He didn't have to ask Neji if he knew how to climb trees, because he was a Hyuga. Having masterful chakra control was completely necessary on being a Hyuga. It was completely impossible for a Hyuga to have terrible control over their chakra. Even Hinata, the shy and timid Hyuga that hated fighting, had excellent chakra control. And she was said to be the least skilled of the bunch. Naruto shook his head of thoughts of the shy girl. If he thought about her anymore, then he was going to want to go back and get her. You're right, it's too late for her. Plus, if you took her, they'll know exactly why you took the Hyugas. Then a war would ignite between the two countries and I doesn't want any of that. I, on the other hand, would love a good war right now. Even with what's been happening the past few years, I still find your life too dull for my tastes. Kurama spoke with a bored tone. Naruto mentally rolled his eyes. Oh please, everything is boring to you. Weren't you pleased with how my clone performed? It was excellently executed, even though that's not how things were supposed to go. I'm extremely glad that Anko appeared when she did. It gave my clone the perfect reason to start the major disturbance. Oh, I'm sure you're glad Anko appeared. Kurama chuckled with a wink. Naruto rolled his eyes again. Keep your mind out of the gutter. I wasn't even thinking about her like that. Naruto said with a mental sigh. Don't be ignorant, Naruto, I received the memory as well. You couldn't keep your eyes off of that woman's assets. That's why her snakes were able to get so close. Kurama said with a laugh. That wasn't even me though. Naruto yelled at the fox, now getting angry. Plus you were the one screaming in my head, the blonde added. Are you seriously telling me you don't know what the definition of a clone is? Kurama boomed back, completely agreeing with the second part. To produce an exact, or near copy, of an object or product. I know what a clone is. Naruto fired back immediately. Don't get eaten, brat. Kurama growled at the blonde. Yeah, you're always threatening me. Naruto waved off the threat, but knew that if the chance arrived, Kurama would eat him. I wouldn't taste good anyway. The group of 5 finally made it into Lightning Country after 2 full days. Not everyone had the reserves of a Jinchuriki. Something Naruto wasn't used to, having been with Yugito for so long. Even a had amazing chakra reserves, rivaling the reserves of the Aikibi no Shukaku. Well guys, this is Lightning Country, it's only going to get higher from here. You're going to need multiple breaks, to get yourself situated with the higher altitude. Naruto informed the group of Hyuga. They nodded, knowing the dangers of rushing into an area where the oxygen intake is lower than what they're used to. Are the thunderstorms in Kumo really as dangerous as the stories are? Neji asked, curious about the weather there. Naruto chuckled and nodded his head. Yeah, they're true. Though, those stories don't compare to the real thing. If you have lightning affinity, you might come to enjoy the storms. I get struck with lightning bolts all the time. Though, after the 5th consecutive one, I feel near exhausted. But that was my fault, training during those storms are dangerous. But I'm ambitious in my attempt to strengthen my lightning affinity. Naruto said with a smirk. You're a real masochist, aren't you, Naruto-san? Hotaru asked with a shake of her head. Or I'm a genius. Naruto said with a big smile. With Kurama constantly healing me, I'm sure I'll soon have the power to control lightning from my fingertips. The things I'll do for knowledge and power. Naruto mused as they entered the border village. Do you think Konoha will send Anbu inside Lightning Country? One of the twins asked, quickly changing the subject. Naruto nodded as they passed a few people. Eventually. That's why I put a genjutsu over your eyes a few minutes ago. With that, people won't see your white eyes, only brown. Naruto said, entering an inn. This shocked the Hyuga as they only just noticed the distortion of chakra in their eyes. Without their Byakugans active, they were clearly unable to detect the small illusion. They left it there, seeing the logic behind tactic. When the time comes for the Konoha Anbu to enter the country and interrogate people, they'll be oblivious to the situation. So why are we stopping now? We can still continue toward the village. The other twin asked. Naruto looked back at him with a confused face. Aren't you hungry? We haven't eaten since Hot Springs Country, and I need to sleep near a fireplace. Kurama helps keep my body temperature high, but being in Frost Country for so long, makes my clothes stiff with coldness. I swear the very first time going through that frigid country, I was this close to becoming a foxicle. Naruto said, squinting his fingers very closely together, yet leaving them separated. You're lucky I told you to keep your chakra surrounding your body, or else the same would have happened to you, the blonde said, pointing at Neji. I believe you completely. Now, let's get to that fireplace. Neji said, having been forced to use that, very cold, soldier pill inside that horrible country. Naruto smiled and turned to the receptionist. Hello miss, we're going to need a room with fireplaces. Naruto said with a smile. Sure. That room will only have 2 beds, is that okay with you? The young lady asked with a smile. The blonde nodded. That's fine with me. Naruto replied. That'll be 1500 ryo for 1 night, 3000 for 2. How long do you plan on staying? She asked while typing in her little computer. Only for tonight. Naruto answered while tapping his fingers on his leg. She needed to hurry up so he could get some grub in him. He smiled as he turned. There's a great place down the road from here, I remember going a few years ago. The best thing is there's a delivery service, after paying I'll head over and bring the food here. Is that a good plan, guys? Naruto asked with a smile as they nodded. What kind of food does this country have? Neji asked. Naruto scratched his head and shrugged his shoulders. Mountain food, he said with a chuckle as everyone face faulted. There's a lot of bears and elk in the country. Mountain lions, cougars, and wild boar is further north. And a few sheep too. Naruto answered with a shrug of his shoulders. He paid for their room, got the key and tossed it to one of the twins. I'll be back in a few minutes, he said, body flickering out of the inn. Naruto reappeared on the roof and immediately bounded from it. He leapt from roof to roof, before he sensed something coming for him. Naruto turned his head to see the Kusarigama headed right for his foot, intent on wrapping around it. He clapped his hands, altering the flight path of the chained weapon with a precise gust of wind. The blonde landed on the next roof and stared as the weapon returned to the owner. Who are you and what do you want? He asked, noticing the area was clear of citizens. I'm just a hunter of hunters. Did you know you have a bounty on your head from other bounties? The man asked while casually swinging his weapon of choice with barely any movement in his joints. The man was rather tall, passing 6 feet easily. He wore an Iwa headband and a black cloth around his head. His attire was black, merging with the night around him. Though the moon still provided just a little bit of light. The blonde rose a brow at the question. No, I had no idea. Does that even make sense? He asked with nothing but confusion in his expression. Yes, it does. When a hunter gets as famous as you did, criminals put a price on your head. Just think of me as your opposite, he said before throwing the weapon once more. The blonde snapped his fingers and watched as the middle of the chain burst into flames. He tilted his head, effectively dodging the sickle part of the weapon, never able to return to its owner. I think I get what you mean. You're a criminal version of a bounty hunter. I never knew people like that existed, Naruto said, putting a hand on his hips. The Iowa missing nin didn't feel discouraged at all, and only seemed to widen his smirk. Exactly, and I have to tell you. I'm on a roll, not counting you, I've killed 19 bounty hunters. Be a sport and become my 20. He asked before snapping his own fingers. 3 more figures came out of the hiding spots, throwing kunai and shurikens at the blonde. Naruto stared at the approaching projectiles with a blank face, before someone appeared in front of him and spun, releasing chakra from all of their tenketsu. The projectiles bounced off the rotating sphere of chakra. The figure stopped spinning, revealing Hotaru. Are you okay, Naruto-sama? She asked, glaring at the attackers. I'm fine, Hotaru-san. I could have handled this without your help, but I guess you were having none of that, huh? He asked with a chuckle. As the others appeared around them. Everybody's here, huh? Were you so hungry or did you sense the apparent danger I was in? Naruto asked with a raised brow. We had a feeling in the back of our heads. We knew something was wrong when we sensed a group following us. At first we thought they were Anbu, but when they followed you, we quickly deduced they were after you. Daiki answered, his Byakugan active as he and the others glared at the criminals. I simply noticed their Iwa headbands, and knew they were going after Naruto, considering he's the 4th son. Neji stated, dropping into a Juken stance. I was just hungry, Taiki said with an embarrassed chuckle. Now that you mention it, he does resemble that bastard of a Hokage. One of the older-looking criminals said, sneering at Naruto's blonde hair and blue eyes. I can't wait to gouge those blue eyes of his out, he said, glaring at the blonde. At that, Naruto's eyes turned amber as he smirked at the surprise on the man's face. Is this better for you? He asked before cracking his knuckles. Like I said earlier, I can handle this, he said, directing his gaze at one of the criminal hunters on the parallel roofs. The other 2 were in separate alleys. If you must handle the riff-raff, I'll handle the leader, Naruto ordered before dropping down into the street. You're a one, aren't you? The man asked the blonde, he said before charging at the blonde head-on. Not as much as you, Naruto said before easily weaving through the man's strikes. Your movements are so slow, it's pathetic. Naruto goaded the man into anger, smirking when it worked. The man clenched his yellow teeth in anger as he begun swinging wild haymakers. Then I should slow you down, he said, reaching his hand out to grab onto the blonde's collar. The blonde saw this and quickly took a step forward, into the man's personal space. The blonde smirked and struck the man's solar plexus with extreme precision. He didn't stop and delivered a quick uppercut to the Iowa criminal's chin. The blonde continued with his assault as he grabbed the man's shirt and pulled hard. He quickly jumped and kneed the man in the throat, crushing the larynx. Instantly the man felt the results of the attack and dropped to his knees. Say good night forever, the blonde said, smirking at the pun he just made. He pulled his arm back all the way it could, charging blue flames around his fist as he inhaled deeply. His inner fire burned deeply within his core, just begging to be released. A release it did, as Naruto quickly launched his fist at the defenseless head. At the point of contact, blue flames erupted in every direction. The explosion was so devastating that Naruto's body was flung backwards due to the force of it. He crashed through the building behind him, which just so happened to be the food place he was talking about. Damn it, Naruto-san, this is the 2nd time you've done this, the man behind the counter said, his face infuriated with anger. Sorry Moku-san, I tried to not. But since I'm here, I'll have some fried boar to go. Naruto said with an innocent smile. The middle-aged Moku glared at the blonde's innocent smile. Come on Moku-san, you know I can pay for the repairs to the shop. Naruto pleaded, his eyes changing back to blue. Moku kept his green eyes on the blue orbs of one of his craziest friends. I really hate when you do that. He sneered as he gave in. Naruto shot his fists in the air in victory as the Hyugas walked through the wreckage. Naruto-sama, are you okay? The feminine voice of Hotaru reached the duo's ears. Enough with the unnecessary concern Hotaru-san. I'm fine, I did this to myself, and Moku-san on accident. Again, sorry, he said flipping to his feet. After we eat and sleep we'll head straight to Kumo. Naruto informed as the Hyuga nodded in confirmation. Ki. Like Naruto had said, at the first rays of light, the group was already out of the border village. The group kept their speed at average genin speed, Neji still nursing a bruised rib from the fight the previous night. Sorry Naruto-sama, I might have underestimated him just a little bit. Neji apologized to the blonde for their slowed pace. Enough with that, just thank Taiki he was able to defeat your opponent. Though you shouldn't have even fought in the first place. You're strong, but judging from the guy's chakra reserves, I'll have to put him at Chunin level. A caliber of shinobi you weren't prepared for, at least not yet. Naruto said, not seeing Neji shoot Taiki a nod of thanks. Taiki returned it and Daiki smirked. Come on Prodigy-san, your Jukin still needs work. Neji looked over to the other twin and stared blankly at him. I appreciate your concern, but it was a lucky shot on his part. Honestly I think I need to overestimate every enemy I face. Plus, I took the liberty of swiping a few of the main house's techniques, he said with his own smirk. Huh, I hadn't even thought of that. That was a great of you to take the initiative like that. It'll make things easier for us, since we've only had a look at a single technique, Hakusho Kaden. 8 trigrams palms revolving heaven, Hotaru informed with a small smile as she looked back at Neji. Yup. It would have been, until we got promoted to Jonin, that we would have had a look at another technique. Daiki explained with a frown at the retarded conditions for knowledge in the Hyuga clan. After reaching Jonin, it would go from years, by 5 each. Taiki added with his own frown. That is completely retarded. Naruto stated with amber eyes. I should have tried to persuade the entire branch house and bring them to Kumo. Naruto said angered beyond belief now. I was told by my father, years ago, that the main house did that to give us something to look forward to. It's rare for anyone from the main house to show generosity towards a branch member. So letting a member of the branch house learn a main house technique once in a while, would keep us loyal to them. Neji stated with a frown. Now, in a way, he was being reunited with his father, since Kumo had his body. Naruto had been looking at Neji when he was talking, and already had a feeling of what he was thinking about at the moment. He turned his head back forward and picked up the pace, just a little. They were only a few, odd, hours away from the village now and he really wanted to officially end this mission. Only then would he have a full team and officially a genin as well. Run through the pain Neji. Taiki told the young Hyuga, noticing the small increase of speed on Naruto's part. Kumogakure, training field. Yugito sat cross-legged in the middle of a flat field. A blue aura was around her, indicating she was training with her tailed beast, Matabi. Twin, blue, tails were behind her, swaying with the wind. You have excellent control with version 1 Yugito-chan. In a month or two, you could have the same control with version 2. Then after that, a full transformation, only Killer B-san and Gyuki can accomplish, along with Yagura-san and Isobe. Matabi said, encouraging Yugito to push herself more as time went by. While using Matabi's chakra, Yugito's fire style became on par with Naruto's mysterious blue flames. Though if he was to use Kurama's chakra and use the blue flames, she would be outmatched. But recently she gained knowledge of Matabi's personal hell fire. The fire that made up the large feline's body was now a weapon for her to use, sadly only when using Matabi's chakra. Yugito rose her hands and went through a set of hand seals. Kaden. Futago no Hano. Twin flames, she said, snapping her eyes open and exhaling 2 streams of dark blue flames. The flames traveled a few dozen meters before turning into hot air. Yugito smiled and stood to her feet. That's one technique of yours I mastered. What do you have for me next? She asked before the aura around her left her body and she was left a little woozy. You're still using too much of my chakra in that technique. You need to lessen the amount like I said, the twin-tailed beast said with a mental shake of her head. Well, excuse me for not caring about something called overkill. I, for one, think it's better to make sure the one you're trying to kill is dead. And when I see Naruto, I'm going to kill him for being gone for so long. Yugito hissed in her mind. Speaking of Naruto, isn't that his chakra signature entering the village right now? Matabi asked with a curious tone in her voice. It was always a little harder for her to sense chakra, one of the reasons why she was captured off guard. What Naruto? Where? The concerned blonde exclaimed before quickly bounding off towards the main gate of Kumogakure. He. Naruto and the group finally crossed the main gate of Kumo after 5 hours of running. The blonde turned to the group to see they were slightly winded. I kind of forgot about you guys. Being back home just filled me with happiness. Now I can finally change out of these clothes. Naruto said, looking down at his full body suit underneath the ragged black cloak. He rose his head and smiled. Well, let's go guys. He said, waving at random people, all of them surprised to see the group of Hyuga behind him. Naruto-kun. A voice yelled before colliding with the blonde. The blonde was launched backwards, with the figure clutching tightly on him. Naruto lost his footing and the 2 blondes began to roll, before coming to a stop with the female blonde on top of the male. While that was an unexpected welcome, the whiskered container said with a smile as the dirt cloud cleared to reveal a smiling Yugito. Hey Yugi-chan, I guess you missed me. He asked with a chuckle and a wink. Yugito blushed slightly but only seemed to smile wider. I sure did. It's been boring over here without my trusted companion here to entertain me, she said, peeling herself off his person. Naruto rose to high feet and looked at the Hyuga. It's nice to see you 4 didn't even move from your spots. Real classy guys, nice job being my bodyguards. The whiskered blonde frowned as he patted the dirt from his clothes. Our eyes saw her coming as soon as we entered the village. Judging from the similar, yet completely different, power inside of her, we quickly deduced she was out of our leagues to guard against. Neji chose to answer quickly before the other 3 could even utter a word. Great deduction, kid. I'm Yugito ni, container of the Nibi no Nekomata. Pleasure to meet your acquaintances. Yugito said, extending a hand towards them. Neji saw the challenge and extended his own hand. When they shook, Yugito smirked and turned to Naruto. Now I know why you chose this one. He'll be perfect, she said before releasing the Hyuga's hand and quickly grabbed Naruto's hand. Now come on, Raikage-sama should be out of the meeting by now. When the group arrived, they had to wait in the lobby for Bakaza was still in the meeting. The whiskered blonde turned to the blonde genin with a twitch of his eye. Usually you're right about these things, Yugito. Could something be the matter with you? He asked with a slow blink. Yugito chuckled nervously and looked at the clock on the wall opposite her. You don't know the half of it. Matabi echoed in Yugito's mind, causing the girl to blush a bit. Oh, it's nothing. I just got over a flu a few days ago, she said, slowly rubbing her arm. Naruto continued to look at her with a blank face. We're containers of tailed beasts. We don't get sick, he stated with the same stoic gaze. She chuckled more nervously before faking a few coughs. She smiled at the other blonde, but in seeing his same expression she quickly got angry. I should kill you for worrying me so much, she yelled, getting a surprise expression from everyone in the room. She covered her mouth and blushed dark crimson. She looked away and was glad when the Raikage's door opened, and some old guy walked out. Hey look, the meeting's over. Yay. She softly cheered before standing up and quickly walking into the office. What a weird girl, one of the twins said. I love it, Naruto said with a grin as he stood and followed. When the group entered the room, they saw with a huge barbell in a single hand. Turned his head with a big grin and threw the barbell to the other side of the room. The heavy thudding of the room resonated and completely surprised the Hyuga. If it wasn't for the multiple seals in the room, the weights would have easily crashed through the floor. Naruto, I've never been so proud of you in my single year of knowing you, said, extending his fist towards the blonde. Naruto grinned wide as well and bumped fist with the Yondaime Raikage, something only his brother has ever done. Thank you, Raikage-sensei. As you can see, my mission is accomplished, with interest. I can see that, though I can immediately tell these aren't main house members, said, looking closely at the Hyuga behind the blonde, who were trying to appear stoic. Naruto smirked and nodded his head. You're right, they're not. They're branch members, not the pompous assholes of the main house. Naruto turned and motioned for Neji to step forward and proceeded to remove the cloth around his forehead. You see this seal? It's completely different from the other members of the branch family. It's a seal of my creation, Naruto said, pointing to the seal. Nodded and stood to his feet and walked around his desk, towering over everyone. Interesting. I see you chose your clan's crest as the design. What'll this do to their Byakugan after they die? Naruto crossed his arms and tried to remember. Their Byakugan will still be sealed upon their death, something I have yet to reverse. Though I was successful of getting rid of the punishment part of the seal, and switched it with one that'll amplify their dojutsu. To what extent, that's dependent on the user. It also makes them slightly more loyal to me in the village of Kumo, though that could just be the disdain they have for the main house. Naruto said, tapping his chin. What do you guys think? Naruto asked, turning his head to look at the liberated Hyuga. Our hate for the main house. It's definitely that, Taiki said with a cross of his arms. If you could bring the rest of the branch family here, and give them this seal, Kumo would be in your debt, Naruto-kun. Yugito said, wanting to join the conversation. He doesn't have to do that now, he's already done enough. But in due time, Naruto said, crossing his own arms. Also, I got the message you sent earlier via carrier pigeon. Added, confusing everyone else. When did you send him a message? Hotaru asked with a confused expression. Last night. I did it while everyone was sleeping, Naruto said, turning his head with a smirk. Well, what did you ask? Neji asked with a stoic expression. The blonde's smirk widened. In a moment, Neji, Naruto said, turning back to his sensei. Go on, sensei, the ambiance is set, he said with a chuckle. Shook his head and went back around his desk. So you're Neji. I understand now. Naruto requested that, along with Yugito, you three become an official genin team. Yugito gasped. But Naruto-kun, you don't like hunting criminals with me? She asked with tears prickling the corners of her eyes. Naruto rose an eyebrow at her behavior. Yugi-chan, we already had a talk about this months ago. In order to go after higher-ranked criminals we need to officially rise in the village's ranks. Plus we'll have another member of the team to help us. Naruto said as Yugito blinked for a while. She smiled softly and put her hands behind her back. Oh yeah, I kind of forgot that conversation, she said embarrassingly rocking on the balls of her feet. Naruto looked back to a before the Raikage rose his hand. I talked to him and he agreed wholeheartedly. You don't know how many times he apologized to me. I said with a chuckle. The blonde chuckled before his face lit up in remembrance. Oh yeah, I also have another present to give you. Naruto said digging in his cloak for something. Arose an eyebrow and leaned back against his chair. What is it, Naruto? He asked before Naruto removed a scroll. Found it. He yelled triumphantly with a broad grin. I present to you, the Forbidden Scroll of Sealing, recently liberated from Konoha. Along with this, I was also able to learn quite a few things about Konoha's defense and a secret exit entrance the village may or may not be aware of. Naruto said unsealing a larger scroll from the smaller one. He tossed it to the Raikage, who easily caught it with one hand. Just what I'd expect from my only pupil. Appraised as one of the village's bold members appeared and took the scroll. Store that with our village's own scroll. I'll study it later, he said as the masked man nodded and vanished along with the scroll. Wait, I have a question. Yugito asked. Maybe two. She added with an inquisitive look on her face. Go on, Yugito, you have permission to speak your mind right now. I said looking at her intensely. Okay, first, who's going to be our sensei? And second, what are they going to do? She asked pointing at the Hyuga. Naruto nodded his head. That's a good question. We can't study their Byakugan like how you wanted to in the past. I nodded. That is no longer necessary. I learned that when that last mission failed. Instead, I now wish for a desire to simply integrate into the village hidden in the clouds. They'll become a clan far stronger and more respected than the one in Konoha. I explained, causing both the blondes to nod their heads. Of course, you're all about power. The more stronger the village is, the less likely we'll actually have to go to war. Naruto said with a smirk. Fear and respect is a needed thing in this day and age. Neji chimed in. Exactly. We'll be feared to the extent that the other villages would have to set aside their differences if they wanted to go to war with us. But that wouldn't be possible given how much hate they have for each other. I said with a smirk. Plus, I got a friend in Suna who could help us if we were ever in that situation. Naruto said with a grin. I nodded, already knowing who Naruto was referring to. Of course. Now to the other question. You're being trained by Darui, who is actually waiting for you as we speak. I said pointing up. Topside. He said. Naruto, Yugito, and Neji. Go up and he will give you a proper evaluation. You three, I trailed off, indicating the defected Hyuga. Stay here, so we can do the paperwork behind this. Everyone nodded and left. Naruto stayed behind, bowing to A. Thank you for relinquishing one of your personal bodyguards for me, the blonde said with complete respect for his sensei. Yeah, go on before I change my mind. I said waving his hand as Naruto grinned and body flickered topside. He. When the newly formed team arrived on the roof, they saw a lone Darui standing there with a far-off look. Sorry we're late, Darui. There was just so much talking going on. Naruto said with a grin. Don't worry about Naruto-kun. I wasn't waiting long, just about an hour or so. Darui responded with a shrug. Meanwhile Yugito looked annoyed. I don't understand why we have to be trained by Mr. Lazy himself. He's the laziest person in the village. She exclaimed, glaring at Darui. That's not true. There's lots of people lazier than me. Darui said with a playful glare. Name one. The Nibi container said with her hands on her hips. The dark-skinned Jonin stared at the girl, the two having their own staring contest. Neji leaned over, a little confused, but his expression belying the fact. What's going on? Who is this guy? He asked. The blonde glanced at him with a grin. That's Darui, one of the strongest Jonin in the village. He may seem lazy, but well, he is kind of lazy. But that's because nothing really exciting happens around him. That's why he agreed to train us, high chance of shit hitting some sort of fan. After that happens, you'll find him to be one of the most active people ever. Naruto said before looking back at the others. He was trained by the Sandame Raikage, you know. Darui grunted as he crossed his arms and looked to the side. I don't have to answer you. I'm your sensei and that's final. He said with a tone of finality. Yugito smirked and crossed her own arms. As long as you realize I won this round.